Welcome to another Jaws Price Talk, which is a part of the World of Ability Podcast Network. It was started a couple of years ago. But I encourage everybody to check out all of the Jaws Coffee Chat social media pages and YouTube channel. And I am Emily, and the podcast engineer slash co-host of this show, along with Kurt Roskopf and John Tarr. John, I'll pass it over to you. I think you had something you wanted to say, kind of a little bit about your background of coming to Christ or anything like that.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm John Tarr. I've been a Christian now for 40 years. I'm 70 years old, so for 30 years of my life, I was an atheist. I was abused as a child in a very oppressive Catholic family, and I went to Catholic grade school, and I had some nuns. And you got to remember, this was in the 1950s, and I had some nuns that were fairly abusive. I was a tough kid, so I'm not going to put all the blame on them. I was a very tough kid, and they were not used to dealing with tough kids. I was very rebellious and fighting back, and a lot of things happened throughout the course of that. And my parents pulled me out of two Catholic grade schools and then put me into the public school. But I actually was somewhat abused in the public school too. So, anyways, so for 30 years of my life, I was a very nasty atheist. And it's very interesting how God finally reached me and got through to me. And it was actually through my own anger issues that he finally reached me. One of the interesting things is I was living in Illinois at the time, and I was a wedding photographer, and I had photographed a wedding for a Catholic Jewish couple. He was Catholic and she was Jewish, and I photographed that wedding. And I had a chance to talk to him about religion a little bit because I thought it was interesting seeing a rabbi and a Catholic priest at the wedding. And then when he came to pick up the wedding proofs, I had a chance with him and his brother to actually go through and talk about different religions. And the two of them ended up staying at my house for about 2 hours. So we talked about a lot of stuff. And then he gave me a P.O. box number of where he lived in Oregon and said, if you're ever through the area, look me up. And that's exactly what I did about a year later. And I was going through the area, and I went to the P.O. box number in the Little Applegate Valley in Medford, Oregon. And I went up into the post office, and I told the postmistress that was in there, I don't know, this is the name of the person I'm trying to track down. Here's this P.O. box number, but I don't know where he's located, and I don't know how to get a hold of him. And it was a very, very small post office. And she said, by law, I cannot do that. She said, but those two guys walking out right there. She said, go ask them. So that's exactly what I did. And I caught up to them and I said, hey, I'm looking for this individual. Can you help me? And they looked at each other and laughed because it was not only their boss, but their best friend. And they said, well, give us a minute and we will call him. So they went to a payphone and they made a telephone call to him, and they told him there's a guy that photographed your brother's wedding, and he's come here to visit you. And all I could see was the two of them laughing and laughing, and they came back and said, "Yeah." He said, "Come on over right away, follow us, and we'll take you to where he lives." Anyways, I did go. It was kind of in a hippie community. And at the time, about a quarter of the hippie community had become Christian in the last year and a half. And so when we drove up, John actually lived in a big tree house, and you had to go down a hill and then across a small bridge that was a creek there where the parking was. And when we pulled up and I parked in the little parking spots, John was waiting for me. And when I got out of the car, he hugged me. Anyways, I ended up spending about 3 weeks with John. Um, and then I started to go to his church, and in the process of going to his church with him, I just remember the pastor when it was very unusual because it was called the Little Applegate Christian Fellowship. And I believe it's still there, but they've moved into a building of its own. And I just remember sitting in the crowd with all the other people. They had 1,000 people coming to this really dinky little church on the middle of nowhere. So, but as he was preaching, uh, I remember not only feeling very convicted, but it was like he was talking directly to me. Obviously, he wasn't, but it just felt like it to me. I had a lot of questions and a lot of questions for John himself, and I kind of exhausted him. And then he handed me this book. It was a very thick book with really small printing in it because they had a lot of information to give. And it was called The History of Christianity. So I read it, and the book was very honest. It talked about the positive sides of Christianity and things that had happened in the past, but it also talked about a lot of the really negative things. It was the negative things that really kind of spoke to me because as I got about halfway through the book, um, I remember thinking, if this is true and all this stuff happened in the beginning of Christianity, probably for the first few hundred years, actually, I think all the way up to the invention of the printing press, um, it was just, spoke to me that if all this stuff happened, this Christian cult, and that's what I felt like it was a cult, could not have survived and could not have spread out all over the world like it did, and mouth to mouth, and then the different preachings and stuff like that. In my own mind, I was just thinking this could not have happened. So, with all this crazy stuff and chaos that ensued, it just occurred to me that God Himself had to be behind this. And so that's when I began to really open my mind about that there is a God or an intelligent designer behind the universe itself. Um, I am now a Christian apologetic, and apologetics means that you dig deep into the faith itself. Sometimes very hard to answer questions, and you kind of do research. And there's a number of different apologetists out there in the Christian world. Um, One is Dr. William Lane Craig. He is probably the foremost, and I listen to him quite a bit, but there's a number of other ones out there too. Um, and one of the things that they said is, how can you prove that there is a God or there is an intelligent designer behind the universe itself? And one of the ways you can prove that is the Big Bang. The cosmological singularity is what scientists call it. And it says that the universe started or began 13.8 billion years ago. I'm an old earther, so it means that I believe that the earth is very old. There's a lot of young earthers that believe the universe is 19,000 years old, but I don't believe that. I'm involved in science groups and with astronomers, and Hugh Ross is one that reasons to believe. Anyways, I listened to a lot of stuff that he said, but one of the ways that you can prove that there is a God is by the Big Bang, and it says that the Big Bang started 13.8 billion years ago. So if that's true, and that the universe started at one specific point in time, and remember, there was no time or space before the universe came into being. So if that's true, who pulled the trigger to start the universe? Um, and yeah, as we know in Christianity and the Bible, if you look at the first couple of paragraphs of Genesis, it said God spoke the universe, or spoke in everything into being at one specific point in time. So that's what I had. Later on, because I was having a problem. I was evolution was my God, and I no longer believe in evolution, but I do believe that the universe is very old, and that God pulled the trigger on it for it all to start. And there's a couple other things. I've written some articles about other things that kind of proves that there is a God that scientists have a real problem with trying to answer. Like I said, the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang, is one that they are wrestling with like crazy. And they're coming up with all kinds of alternative uh, creation models, like multi universes, or life coming from outer space on a meteor or something like that. Um, but they would still deal with the same problem if life came from someplace else in the universe. So that's and then another thing that kind of blew me away is when I found out, and I didn't really know this until about 40 years ago, how big the universe is. How big is it? They thought it was, first thought it was a few hundred stars out there. Then they came to revise that to say there was a few thousand. And then all of a sudden, with the advent of the new telescopes and stuff, they found out that the universe is absolutely enormous. It's trillions upon trillions of stars, and it blows me away. One way I have people consider how big the universe is you took all the stars that are in the Milky Way galaxy that we live in, just our galaxy. There are more grains of sand on all the beaches on our planet. That's 10 to about the 10th power. But the thing that's really mind blowing to that is, do you know how many galaxies, not just the Milky Way, but how many galaxies are in the universe? And this blows you away. There are more grains of sand on all the beaches of our planet than there are galaxies in our universe. And that goes to 150 to the 100th power. And it just, that's amazing how many zeros are behind that. So how many trillions of stars there are, not just galaxies, but not just stars. So that just kind of is mind numbing. And new galaxies are being made every day out there in different parts of the universe. They have gone with the telescope, and the new one that's out there in space right now that started functioning about 6 months ago. They went to some of the black parts of the space that they couldn't see anything, and they just focused it on that little small spot. And lo and behold, as they began to really get the images back, they found out there were thousands upon thousands more stars in those black spaces. So I had to think, who is this intelligent designer that could make such a thing, such a thing as a universe that we live in? Um, Talking about aliens is like another whole story that we may get into sometime. I have my thoughts on that. But just this is one question of how absolutely enormous our universe is. And then a second thing that they have, when they have finally understood DNA, they have realized that DNA could not just have come out of nothing, that it could not have just been created on its own with no guiding force, because there is so much information. And a lot of people that do study in DNA said it's almost like it's digital code, and it tells how a certain creature on our planet is going to uh, become adult, from plants to animals and everything. It's just jam packed full of all kinds of digital information. And um, you're just thinking about that. How could that happen if it was an unguided process, if there was not an intelligent designer behind it? And if you begin to think about a couple of these things, you got to go, oh my God, that's right. It doesn't make any sense. So, as I was an atheist, these were questions I didn't really consider. But now that I am a Christian, I was like, how was I fooled? How could I not? But I didn't really know the science that much. And if you find out about a lot of atheist evolution believers, they have not really thought about some of these things in real deep detail, because it will tell them. It may not tell you that the specific kind of God there is, but there is something, an intelligent designer behind it all. I wish to think that it is I'm a Christian, a Christian, um, and I read the Bible, and I believe the Bible is 100% accurate. And there's a lot of information in there that God wants to partake to us. And the reason, like I said, Christianity is the only religion besides Jews and Muslims and Christians that believe in Genesis, the first five books of the Bible. And as I said before, Genesis says that God spoke the universe into being at one specific point in time. There is no other religion that says that. That they all say that the universe has been here forever, and that's not true. It's not true. According to science and astronomy, it is not. That's not true. So it's something to really consider. That's what brought me and spoke to my heart. Um, Another thing is, I found out as I was writing certain articles for the website that what makes an atheist was one article. And as I went along, I found out that a lot of atheists were actually a believer in some type of church at one time, a Christian church, a Jewish church, or even Muslim. And what caused them to turn away? And it was something happened in their life, either early in their years or later as they became an adult, that they were abused at some point in time and they turned their back on God. I know a lot of Mormons are like that, Seventh-day Adventists are like that. You could go across the whole spectrum and you can see um, that they were absolutely fed up with religion, and that's what happened to me. I was abused, like I said, verbally. Sometimes I would do things when I was in a Catholic grade school, and the nun would try to grab me and give me a big whack with her paddle. But I would run and hide in a corner, and she'd have to get another nun or two to help track me down. But there were other things too that happened, and my family, my mother was very verbally abusive. But I would think if these people are people of God, why would they treat children like this? So, anyways, that's kind of part of my background and where I come from. But I find that I'm not alone. There's a lot of other people that have turned their back on God. Mormons are a big deal. I've actually witnessed to Mormons before because they've taken on a lot of abuse too. But like I said, there's a lot of religions that have done this. But God uses that. God uses this abuse, and He functioned on me um, when I was 30 years old. And it was a rough go because of what happened to me. I apparently think that He had to kind of make it a tough journey for me because I had so many doubts and I was so rebellious. And I can be somewhat rebellious at times, but as time has gone on, I have pushed it away and pushed it away. I'm not really rebellious towards God anymore. Sometimes I'm rebellious towards authority, but not God anymore. Because it finally worked into my head that God is the creator of the universe. He loves me. I'm a slave to Him, and I know a lot of people uh, but I'm His bride also, because I'm the bride of church. The church is His bride, and He's the groom. But I just know that um, He had to come from this direction on me. Uh, and then when I finally, there was just so many things that just made sense when I became a Christian. And I have a Christian worldview now, where I used to have a worldview towards the culture. The culture is so out of control and so screwed up, but I have the Christian worldview that we are all sinners. All human beings have this sin nature about us. Otherwise, why would have all this crazy chaos and killing and wars and fighting of wars and things like that? Why would they have occurred throughout the history of mankind? It's just repeated itself over and over again. And that's because men have this sinful nature. They will always seek the path of least resistance, which is um, which is um, being selfish, self-centered, and wanting things for themselves, and not really giving a rat's behind on the rest of civilization and human beings. Um, Even today, when a lot of men get divorced, they almost forget about their children and providing for them because they're selfish. We are selfish, our human nature. Women can be this way too, but I have come to believe that men are more so. But God has to deal with the sinful nature and come into our lives as a spirit, the Spirit of God, and come into us. And that's when we begin to really make some big changes in our lives. I'm not the man I was 40 years ago. I'm not even the man I was 10 years ago or 5 years ago. God is constantly at work in me, and He constantly helps me to view the world from that perspective, from His perspective, because it's really adverse to Him. It's really backward to Him. It's wrong. So, and I have given up that rebellion, and I've asked Him to give me uh, certain um, how does he view things instead of what I think it should be viewed. So that's kind of a synopsis where I came from, and so, anyways, hey, you guys, anybody else have something to add to all of this? Hey, Kurt.
Kurt, do you have anything you'd like to say? If you're there.
Curtis, there you are.
Yeah, so Emily, are you going to join us? Let's dive into this. It's been quite a sharing session. Again, Emily, I bring back that you've gotten into attending Mass again, as far as I know, the last few weeks. And, the idea of, a turning point. I mean, I don't have that life journey of, identifying as an atheist, but I think whether you identify as an atheist or not, I think we're all challenged with the idea of, where are we in a relationship with Christ, or do we get caught in the secular world where we get caught up into the man-made existence of things and we lose touch with sacred scripture, we lose touch with reaching for Christ to help us out of challenges in life, and so I think most all of us can find that. And then I mean, everybody has challenges. I mean, I know at the church that I belong to, we had a priest who ended up leaving our church because he had to deal with, what seemed to be some experience of loneliness. That even though he's a priest, and priests are dealing with people all the time, and you're a priest, and the role of Christ in your life, it was a good reminder about how everybody's human, everybody has problems, and really the issue there with the role of the priest is, you're in service and you spend so much time being a servant, lose yourself process. And I guess that's what was missing there, for our former priest, was he needed to sort out in his life how he was going to, have a person or people that he could really lean on to really join in the journey and to, get through life with him, because that's what I understood. Even though the archdiocese, has people that are resourceful and stuff like that, he just really seemed to lack he was looking for in friendship, and that created this void in his life that, so that becomes, the interesting thing is that, even though we talk about our own journey with Christ, which is a very personal thing, and it's for us to do in our prayer closet, our own personal thoughts as we exist, Christ is always there. That is the source of fulfillment. But, I guess the scriptural thing of when two or more gather in his name, I guess that gathering aspect, is important in all of this, the idea of discernment. But it was interesting to see someone in the role of a priest, really look at that. It does make a difference who we're on this journey with. It almost seems like it shouldn't matter. But for those of us that really feel that it doesn't matter, I guess it's maybe a reminder that we're fortunate, if we're in that place. But maybe out there in a journey where they're not with the people they seem to crave to be with. And, in prayer life or in our constructs with building a life with Christ, that, start to think about that, in terms of who he is putting us with. Are we missing the reasons why? And are we preparing to be with that person that we're yearning to be with? So, Emily, what are your thoughts? Where are you in your journey with Christ? And, kind of what do you do to evaluate how you're doing, in life and the role of Christ or not? And, does any of this speak to you that it matters who you're with as you're considering discernment for how you're doing in your journey with Christ?
Well, I mean, I think that it's important to kind of evaluate who you're taking around in terms of kind of where you're going, because I know there's a thing about I don't remember how the saying goes right now, but it's like you're be like the 5 people you hang around the most. So depending on kind of what those 5 people are doing, you might be kind of doing kind of similar things. But I think it's kind of important for kind of for who you're hanging around with, for your own like mental health and sanity. Not. I mean, with like all the negativity and negative people out there. Is that sort of answering your question, Kurt?
Yeah, that was good, Emily.
Yeah, I mean,
If I could,
it's interesting you bring that up. It's interesting to have that brought up about, how significant the 5 most significant people in your life and kind of what that means in terms of what you're yielding in your life. And I suppose it would be an interesting, interesting to unfold that in terms of like the idea of relationships and, like the scriptural passage or passages about being equally yoked, and things like that. I've talked about, in the past where our water skiing, I was at a practice one night on a Tuesday and I was out on the water, skied up to the shoreline, came out of the water with my skis and whatever. And then being a show skier, I'm kind of attentive, or at least for me, my demeanor is I'm very attentive to who is in the park area and who's looking on. And there was a gentleman over by one of the trees there, and he was looking onto the water skiing. And I kind of said, "Hey, did you like anything you saw? Did we do okay out there? Did I do okay? Anything good?" And struck up a conversation. And then it kind of switched. I was kind of asking him, like how he's from. Does he enjoy the lake? What does he do? And so he was able to start talking to me about, how he enjoys the lake and the activities and so forth. And I said, "Well, would you ever consider joining the club?" So I asked that question, and I purposely positioned what they say in public speaking is a pause. But it was even more than that. I literally wanted to just drop the conversation to just respect that, hey, I asked the question, and I'm sincerely interested in the response. And so he was struggling to come up with a response to that. And the thing he told me was, "I think you had to," or he's like, "I thought you had to be somebody." So there we have equity, disparagement, that marginalization, and that this feeling that being a public figure and like being a performer and coming up with that grandeur and that stage presence and whatever, kind of like as a group kind of giving that larger than life type feel. Here we had a gentleman who was some sort of a candidate to consider being in our club, and he ruled it out because it's kind of like, it's not for me, because because basically he was thinking he's not good enough. He wasn't important enough. You had to be like, he's a nobody. Like he's not somebody. It's just like, it's a wow moment for me, and this was just a handful of years ago. And I've been in the club, for 37 years, so over 3 decades of being in the club and not realizing that this is an effect that we have on somebody, or we can. And the idea is that if we look in scripture and we look at the life of Christ, what is the story over and over and over again? Christ kept going to these people. And so that was a moment where I felt that little nudge, through Christianity and through, life with Christ, to say, this is a man that you're intended to take care of. This is a situation that you can bring together. You can be that disciple. You can be that evangelist to say, sir, you are somebody. And I think that becomes an analogy then for things that even in church, just think of in churches, that it can be these church politics, and certain members of the church maybe not as much influencing the operation of the church, and for no good reason, things like this. So I think there's all these check-ins. And so, yeah, Emily, to say we are a byproduct, or it's very, you gravitate, to the circumstances around the 5 most significant people you share your time with. And it makes me a little self-conscious being here on the show, because if I start hanging around with Jennifer, you, John, and Emily, and another person, it starts to be like, you guys are my 5 people. So Emily, you really got me thinking. I might have to pray over this. Just kind of trying
good.
to shed light on it, to see if you're with me. Are we having fun here?
Well, good. It's always good to have something to think about. Things like that. I'm glad I could give you something like that to think about.
Yeah, you know what,
John,
Kurt?
remember those are. I was just
You're
going to
gonna
say
say
those
the
are moments, folks.
moments.
What
That's
Kurt
it.
was just saying,
OMG, EMG.
what Kurt was just saying about a partner. My wife is a born again Christian too, and we have had many deep conversations about Christ. I don't even know what 2 people would, if they were married and they were not Christian, what do they actually talk about? To me, being a Christian and talking about the creator of the universe and how he looks at things is absolutely enormous to me. So make sure if you're going to get married to somebody that they're a believer too. The Bible says not to be unevenly yoked. And being that way, that you'll never be able to go to church with another person that you really care about. They'll be antagonistic, and they'll eventually pull you away. But being connected to her, we probably really reconnect with God on a much bigger place, because I can share a lot of things, and even questions that I have a problem with. She has a different perspective on some things that I need to hear and I need to look at also. So that's a big deal. So I wanted to say to you, Kurt, that that was a very interesting comment that you made. So thank you for that.
You bet. So
Yep.
Emily, tell us more about your return to Mass. What has your return to Mass meant for you?
Um, I think in a way, it's been kind of an important thing. Just that, if nothing else, it gets me out of the house instead of being inside 24/7. So he's out doing something, if nothing else. Yeah, especially with being in all the time with the pandemic and COVID and that kind of thing. But also, just that before the pandemic, I used to go a lot more than I have been during the pandemic here. And I mean, when I was, well, I I guess kind of when I was younger, after I moved up to Students Point, I was a little more involved. With the whole thing, but I don't know. It's just kind of one of those things that kind of helps with kind of the whole mental health, kind of well-being of everything, and being able to be around people that we haven't seen in a while, or I should say, well, or anything, with especially with the pandemic and that kind of thing. And I guess maybe kind of the whole thing with getting to know more people than I do here in the Madison area. And deciding whether or not to like join a parish or that kind of thing. Am I going in the right direction that you were thinking, Kurt?
Well, it's your story, so yeah.
Am I giving you another OMG EMG moment?
Of course. Keep bringing them.
One of the things that you said earlier, Kurt, about the Catholic priest leaving the ministry, you remember that?
I think I just lost him, actually.
One of the things you had said that the Catholic priest walking away because of loneliness, that's pretty typical from what I've read. Not only Catholic priests, but it happens to nuns too. When years ago, when I had a photography studio back in Illinois, the priest that had married my wife and I, Immaculate Conception in Waukegan, Illinois, he was a photographer too, and he had a portable trailer that he had turned into a dark room that he had on the grounds right behind the church. And I used to visit with him and talk with him and hang out with him and stuff like that. But eventually, I don't know if he actually quit being a priest, but he had actually gotten a girlfriend. And I remember talking to him in detail about that, what that was like, and what that being a priest and a nun required of them. And the requirement was they couldn't get married. And I always thought that was really sad because I'm married, having a wife, um, especially for priests, they're missing out on so much of the human experience, never having children, never realizing that this other individual is somebody you grow old with and you go through life. Um, and I know he was lonely too. And I think the photography experience was a way to fill that hole. And I had a hole too because I was an atheist. So I had a God sized hole. But even before became a Christian, him and I would talk about this stuff. And I come back and talk about it with my wife. And she hadn't really thought about that. And I don't think a lot of people think about that. And I'll tell you something else that was very interesting too, because I used to go to a 12-step group for anger issues. And I related the experience I had as a kid being abused in the Catholic Church and what some of the nuns had did to me. And lo and behold, one of the people that were in our group, there was probably 12 of us, 13 of us in there, was an ex-nun. And I remember as I was talking about what happened to me, she had gotten up and walked behind me and put both her hands on my shoulder and then proceeded to tell us that she was an ex-nun. And as being a nun at one time, she profusely apologized for what the nuns did to me. And it was, I'll have to tell you that it was like a dam breaking in my life. Um, all I could do was cry. It was like this was something I needed to hear. At I think at that time I was probably about 55 years old, and it was something I needed to hear. That somebody that had abused me asked me to forgive them. And I know it was not the real nun that did it, or nuns, or the church, but it was somebody that was into that big time and then had apologized for that. I can't even tell you what occurred in my spirit because I thought about that on a couple of occasions, and my spirit began to heal. Um, so it was very powerful that night, and I know everybody around the table were all in tears too, and I couldn't stop crying. I had no idea I was gonna react that way. So it has what I guess I'm getting at it. What it comes to is forgiveness, forgiving, and what that healing process can do, not only for the person that you were forgiving, but for the individual that is forgiving. I wasn't forgiving. I was just kind of relaying what occurred, and then she asked me for forgiveness, and I think I gave her. I said they were forgiven, but I can't remember. I was crying so hard. It was like nothing I've ever really felt before, except when I came to Christ, and then watching my wife and my children come to Christ. Because up to that point, like I said, I went to Oregon on this journey, and I was divorced from my wife and had left my kids with her in Arizona as I went to Oregon. Um, about a year and a half later, I came back to Arizona, and my whole family accepted Christ into their lives. And they have to this day, we have 7 grandchildren that all are believers. My oldest grandson just got married about a year ago. But he's a Christian apologetic now too. He's 24 years old, and he's gone back to college for um, um, I think it's called Canyon State, and he's gotten 2 degrees out of it. One for ID development, and the other one is for being a preacher. And he's had to write some very deep, powerful lectures and stuff like that. And him and I talk about all this stuff all the time. I used to talk about things about Christ and some of the deeper things in apologetics to him when he was very young, was like 11 years old. And he just continued on with it. But I just know all my other grandchildren are very much on fire for God now too, as well as my 3 sons. So you just never know where this story is going to take you and what's going to happen. Um, I just know that it was a big deal in my life when this happened with this nun. So I think there's a lot of Catholic nuns and priests that are very lonely. And yes, they have a big following and they meet with a lot of people, but there's just something very personal when you get married. And then you have this individual to bounce things off of, you know. So yeah, it's very, very important that you consider who it is that you're marrying and that you're not unevenly yoked. There's a lot of intended and unintended consequences if you don't marry somebody that's a believer. There's a lot of things that can take you off the road and or off the path. So it's something to really consider and to think about. I just know my wife is the most um, beautiful gift, a gift of God, and has kept me on the narrow path. I have a habit of straying all the time, and she really takes me on the carpet for it. And then we talk about different things, and we listen to different preachers, and we follow different things. Um, so that's very big. That was a really interesting question that you had, Kurt. I really appreciate you bringing that up and how I can share that. So, hey, Kurt, you still there?
I think we might have. Lost him actually. But we are almost at the end of our time of the show here. John, did you have any announcements or any last words that you wanted to
Nope,
send
I
out?
have nothing. I have nothing.
Okay. Uh, so anybody? I just wanted to encourage everybody to check out all of our social media pages. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank John and Kurt for coming on today, and for everybody who has tuned in. Again, to encourage everybody to check out our YouTube channel and our other Joe's Coffee Chat social media pages, and to like, subscribe, or so on, to share, comment, and so on with those. We will be back here next Monday, February 13th, at the same time, 4:15 p.m. Central, 5:15 p.m. Eastern. So if anybody is interested in coming on as a guest, as we are always looking for guests for the show, or to help out the show in any other capacity, to please contact us at jawscoffeechat@gmail.com. That is JAWSCOFFEECHAT@gmail.com. And on behalf of Jen, John, Kurt, myself, and the rest of the World of Ability Podcast Network, we look forward to seeing you all next week. And wish you a safe and productive week, and to stay happy.
Yeah, thank you, and come and hang out with us and bring some questions that you have about religion and Christianity, anything, and we'll see if we can answer it, or it'll give us something to think about and we can answer the following week. So I'll hope to see you there.